I hired 3 lawyers, which is expensive, but it does make me extremely qualified to tell you what to look for. Lawyer 1 for me was too passive. Things were moving too slowly, deadlines were sliding. I was getting a very calm, measured personality, slow responses to email while I felt like my life was actively on fire. I stayed with her longer than I should have because I didn't want to be difficult, but I also wanted to wrap things up. And that was the choice I made. We did wrap things up with that situation at the time. So I can't say I'm mad about how it went, but I was in the middle of a divorce and I still didn't want to be difficult. So I want to say that out loud because I know I'm not the only person who feels that way when they feel like changing something is like, this is going to make me look a certain way. It's going to make me difficult. And it's not. Or even if people think that, who cares, right? You've got to do what takes care of you and your kids. So who cares? Lawyer 2, self proclaimed bulldog. I thought that was a selling point. It was not. He would have gone to war over a spatula and charged me for it, itemized. There are sometimes I felt like he picked fights that cost me money and goodwill with the judges, and they didn't actually move the needle on anything that mattered for me sometimes. I mean, I did make progress with them, so I'm not going to say it was wholly a waste, but it wasn't the approach I liked. If you're going to have to co-parent with this other person, the opposing party in the future, every unnecessary war has a bill attached to it that you're going to be paying forever. Lawyer 3, that's who I have now. Just right, direct. This is my Goldilocks attorney. She fights when it's worth fighting. She tells me when I'm wrong. She tells me to back off when I need to back off. And she doesn't blow smoke up my ass. She is calm. She's calm when I'm panicking. And she is genuinely liked by judges and opposing counsel, which matters more than you would think it does. So today we're going to talk about how to find that person, but don't steal my lawyer. Welcome back to Breaking Upward. I'm Rachel Newhouse. Quick note before we get back into today's episode, nothing in this podcast is legal advice. I'm not a lawyer, folks. I'm just sharing what worked for me and some general information. This is not guidance for your specific legal situation, so please work with a licensed attorney in your state for your situation. With that said, let's get into it. The first consultation that you have with an attorney is an interview. You're hiring. Here is the mindset shift that changes everything about how you walk into a lawyer's office. You are not a supplicant. You are not there to answer their questions and hope that they take your case. You're interviewing them for a job. You two are going to be working together on one of the most important things in your life. That job that they're applying for is to represent your and your child's well-being in one of the most significant legal and financial processes of your life. They work for you. And I do want to say they work with you, that you are paying them, but they work with you. It's not the other way around. You're not begging for them to take you and just doing whatever they say. Okay. This has to be very collaborative, not this other way around. Also, make sure that when you're doing these consultations, come prepared. Be prepared before your first meeting. Have a 1 to 2 page financial overview done, household income, rough assets, debts, who's on what accounts. You don't need your exact numbers yet, just a general picture of a brief written timeline. When you got married, kids, their ages, things like that, significant financial events. If you want some help with this, on my website, if you go to my AI tool, there is a checklist that you can go through about getting prepared to get divorced. That is a free resource. So feel free to go to that if you want some help with what you need to get assembled before these meetings with your lawyer. So one thing I want everyone to do before they go to a meeting with their lawyer is to write your key priorities down, not your lawyer's priorities, not your ex's priorities, but yours. What is non-negotiable for you? What is it that you're willing to concede to get to the end faster? For me, I knew going in, my son's welfare and our custody arrangement was my absolute non-negotiable. I also knew I was willing to make financial concessions to get out of the process faster. Knowing that before I walked in meant I wasn't figuring it out in the room while the meter was running. And believe it or not, most lawyers charge by the minute. Yeah, process that for a second. By the minute. Whoo! That first consultation, remember, this is an interview. You're hiring. Know your non-negotiables before you walk in the door, before anyone starts billing you by the minute. Let's talk about some questions to ask them that actually tell you something. You want to ask them, how do they communicate and how often? It sounds basic, but it's really not. If your lawyer takes 3 days to return emails during a crisis, that is going to be a problem for you. So ask up front, ask about their approach, ask about their caseloads. Are they primarily a negotiator or a litigator? There's no wrong answer to this, but knowing which you're dealing with shapes everything about how your case is handled. So if you have a litigator in a situation that could have been settled and mediated cheaply, a litigator is going to find things to litigate. And guess what? They're going to find things to bill you for too. You also want to ask, have you handled cases with circumstances similar to mine, particularly if you have any kind of special circumstance? So, say you have a circumstance like you have a child who has disabilities who is going to need assistance throughout their life, at the minimum till they're 18. You're going to want somebody who has done that before and who understands that inside and out, because there are special implications for that. Some cases are more straightforward, run of the mill, like just standard conflict, standard kids, standard marriage. Maybe you don't need a specialty, but if you need a specialty, make sure you're working with someone who has dealt with that before. You also want to make sure they've dealt with custody disputes and high conflict situations if you're in one. What if you have a self employed spouse? That changes things too. If you have really complex assets, you just want someone experienced in whatever applies to you. Okay. Especially if you don't have a run of the mill case. General family law experience is good, but specific experience is better. Always ask your lawyer this question in your interview. In your opinion, what is the single most important thing I should do right now to protect my position? The quality and specificity of that answer is going to tell you more about them than any bio can. A good lawyer is going to have a specific and thoughtful answer. A less good lawyer is going to tell you something vague about gathering documents and staying calm. Both of them might be true, but one of them earned the job. So again, make sure you ask your potential attorney, what's the single most important thing I should do right now to protect my position? Here is another one. Personality matters way more than people admit when you're hiring a lawyer. Here is something one of my lawyers told me once that I think is actually true. People hire lawyers who have their own personality or a personality they aspire to. That sounds fine until you really think about it. Because if your personality is anxious and conflict avoidant, you're probably going to hire an anxious and conflict avoidant lawyer. If your personality tends towards aggression and zero sum thinking, you might hire that. Here's the thing, you already have you. Hire someone who can be what you can't be. My first lawyer was too passive because I was in the habit of being too patient in situations I should have pushed back on. My second was a bulldog because by then I was furious and I wanted someone to match my energy. Neither one was a really great fit for my long term case. The third lawyer I got, that I still have, was calm when I was panicking, and I needed that far more than I needed someone mirroring my energy. Trust your gut after the consultation that you have. They usually will give you like a 15-minute consultation for free. So after that, check in with yourself. Do you feel heard? Do you feel like you're a file number to them? Do you feel like they listened to you more than they talked? Or did you spend that time just hearing how amazing they are? You already have you. When you're hiring a divorce attorney, hire someone who can be what you cannot be. The goal isn't a mirror. It's someone who fills in what you're missing. Now, let's walk through some red flags, things to walk away from. First thing I'm going to say is there are attorneys out there that guarantee outcomes. Nobody can guarantee an outcome in family court. Nobody. If they're promising you the house, promising you full custody, anything definitive without knowing the complete picture, they're either naive or they are telling you what you need to hear to sign a retainer for them. Also, an attorney who is inflammatory for the jump, red flag. Litigation is expensive, slow, and corrosive to co-parenting. If your situation allows for any resolution without a courtroom, someone who defaults to aggression is not going to get you there. Another red flag, an attorney who is dismissive of your children or treats custody as a financial lever. That is not someone who is looking out for you or your kids, all right? Stay clear of them. Another red flag is an attorney who doesn't listen. If they're cutting you off, finishing your sentences, getting things wrong constantly, spending the consultation talking about themselves, guess what? that pattern is not going to improve. It's going to get worse, especially as they get deeper and they have many other cases. They're going to be so in their head that they're not going to be thinking about you and your kids. They have too many cases and limited attention, and yours is going to get the minimum. Also, that being said, I do want you to remember that lawyers sometimes have huge caseloads and they may forget details. This is why I always recommend that you have to remain the expert of your own case throughout your whole case, okay? And forever. You are always the expert of your case. One more red flag. There is someone I knew who hired an attorney who told them they were right about everything all the time, every position they took. Guess what that lawyer is doing? That lawyer is collecting a paycheck. A lawyer who only tells you what you want to hear is useless in a negotiation, and they're a liability in the courtroom. Any attorney who guarantees you outcomes, defaults to litigation, or only tells you what you want to hear, those are red flags. You need someone honest enough to tell you when you're wrong. There are options that aren't go to court, too. Most people assume that divorce means litigation, right? You're going to be in a courtroom with a judge sitting up front, and it's going to be your attorney versus their attorney. Oof, I cannot stress enough that is only one option, and it's not the only one. Okay. And it is honestly the worst one. And while I'm not suggesting being conflict avoidant, I do suggest trying everything to not get to trial like that in front of a judge, if at all possible. I know there's situations where it's not possible, but if you can, you want to try something else. So, here's a few other things that exist, especially if you're early in the divorce process. There's something called uncontested divorce. This is that you agree on everything before you file. It's faster, it's cheaper, and this is what I ultimately did combined with mediation to get my initial divorce settled. There's also something called collaborative divorce. This is when you each have an attorney, but you commit to a negotiated resolution rather than litigation. Both attorneys sign an agreement to stay out of court. If the collaboration fails, both attorneys withdraw and you start over. And that creates a really powerful incentive for everyone to stay at the table. There's another option, which is mediation. And I use this again in collaboration with the method that we did. Mediation is when you have a neutral third party to help you reach an agreement. The mediator doesn't represent either of you legally, they just facilitate these conversations. For cases without serious power imbalances or safety concerns, mediation can resolve a divorce in a fraction of the time and the cost of a full litigation. I used a therapist as our mediator rather than an attorney. That was a personal choice I made. Many mediators are attorneys. For us, I felt like the emotions were sensitive and I felt like could get out of control, and that emotions were getting entangled with the practical decisions happening. So I felt like we needed someone to help us navigate that. My attorney did raise an eyebrow at that. That was fine. I knew what I needed in that situation, and it worked for me in that situation. My attorney can have their opinion, but my sanity has a dollar value, and I knew what I was trading. I had to go to court post decree, which means post divorce, later for issues that were, in my opinion, completely unnecessary and should have never happened. I will tell you, it never ended well for the offending party. It was unnecessary emotional and financial damage for both of us. I don't say this to scare you, but I'm telling you from experience. One of my friends said to me, well, I was engaging in a way I shouldn't have when I got in the throes of it over this with my opposing party. I got into it finally because I just lost it eventually. And I do want to be honest about those things because there are points people push you to when you start not acting like yourself anymore. And this was one for me. And a really good friend called me out and she told me this, I think it's like I would call it a grandma saying. She said, when you roll in the mud with pigs, both of you get dirty and only the pig likes it. And I was like, oh, so what you're saying is, right, you get the point. So try to exhaust other options before you get to trial, and don't get so heated that you end up in trial unnecessarily. Really, really try to pull back and negotiate. I know we talked about this in a previous episode, but I do want to rehash this here a little bit. If you can't afford a traditional attorney, it's not a dead end. I need you to hear that clearly because I know there are women who stay in marriages because they believe they cannot afford to leave. But there are resources out there, and I know the resources aren't perfect, but please look at them and exhaust them before you resign yourself to, I can't do this. There's legal aid organizations that provide free or reduced cost family law services based on your income. The thresholds are broader than you might think, too. You can also search your state bar association's website for what's available in your area. There's also law school clinics. Look at your local law school. Many of them run family law clinics where supervised law students, they work on real cases, but they're being supervised by someone who is an expert in the field. And often the quality is often really good and strong because the students are working under a mentor. There's also something called limited scope representation. You can hire an attorney for a specific and defined parts of your agreement only, and they're going to review that for you. And then they can coach you before a hearing where you would represent yourself. So they might help you draft the documents, but you do more of the legwork and they handle the legal strategy. This can cost a few hundred or $1,000 or just upwards of that instead of you spending tens of thousands of dollars. When I was starting in the process and didn't know where to begin, I used a local nonprofit called the Lilac Tree. It's in Evanston, Illinois, to help me understand the full process. They helped me understand what kind of representation I needed, and they helped me navigate toward it, even with limited financial resources. Organizations like this do exist, and this is also why I created Breaking Upward. I do coaching as well. I have my AI tools on the website. I'm happy to help you with this too. So please reach out if you want help with that. Whew, that's a lot of legal talk. Save this episode. Come back to it when you're ready to make those calls. The right lawyer is out there, and knowing what you're looking for makes an enormous difference from the start. I had 3 lawyers, remember? I'm basically an expert at this point. Not legally, obviously. Please consult an actual lawyer for your case. But if you need to know what the wrong fit feels like twice before you get the right one, I got you. In the next episode, we're going to talk about the emotional timeline of divorce because it's not what you think it is. It's not linear, and knowing what to expect makes it survivable. Subscribe if you haven't, and share this one with someone who is still trying to figure out the lawyer piece. I'm Rachel, and this is Breaking Upward. See you next week.
This is your reminder from me and Alice that Breaking Upward is not legal, financial, or therapeutic advice. Please seek out a professional for your specific situation